Hey guys, it's Bec here from Bec Health. I'm one of the performance coaches here. Today I'm going to run you through a couple of lower body exercises that we commonly use in both our everyday clients, our rehab and our junior development. These three exercises I'm going to run you through are the squat, the deadlift pattern and our lunge patterns, all of which have a lot of relevance in our everyday life and our sports, where we're looking at power development through to our ability to walk up and down steps or sit down, stand up. So what I'm going to be running you through today is the things that we're looking for when we're performing these movements, as well as some common faults that we see while we're coaching and around the gym, and then some of the strategies that we use to improve our technique. Let's go. So the first movement we're going through today is our bodyweight squat. So this one has relevance with our everyday life. So anyone who is a desk worker, or really anyone that's standing up and sitting down quite regularly, to our athletes who, when we're looking at our vertical power development, when we're looking at how high we can jump, these are really important to be able to do well. So the things we're looking for with a good squat: we want our knees to be tracking over our toes, so our feet are about our hip width apart. We want our chest to be fairly tall. One of the common misconceptions we get with the squat is that you have to be perfectly upright. In certain sports, yes, this is really important, but in most people, our squat won't be perfectly upright purely because of how our hips move in that sitting down kind of movement. So the goal is to have a neutral spine, so this is maintaining our natural curvatures of our back. So you've got your curve of your thoracic spine and your lumbar spine, and we're not trying to correct ourselves out of this natural pattern by staying completely upright. So some common movement faults we see with a squat are our knees caving in. So this is something that we call valgus. So this is where our knees internally rotate past where our normal hip movement would be. It is normal in some people, and as we are getting towards a maximum weight with testing, to get a little bit of internal rotation at our knees. This is called a valgus twitch, and it is totally normal and safe for our knees. But when we get too much, specifically with our junior athletes, it places a lot of strain on the inside ligaments of our knees. So it's really important that we can correct this, so when we're looking at further developing, that we have a really nice safe squat pattern. The other fault we commonly see is falling really far forward in our squat. So this can be caused by a couple of things. It can be caused by limitations in our range of motion at the hip, or it can be caused by limited ankle mobility. So when people have the limited ankle mobility, they tend to lean forward a little bit more to compensate for the depth that they're not getting from the knee and the hip. So one of the strategies we use to fix our squat patterning is a sit to stand or a box squat. So the aim with this drill is to be able to sit down with a nice tall chest and to be able to push through the heels and drive straight upwards without swinging yourself forward to stand up. So the swinging forward is a really common pattern that we see that we tend to develop as a habit over time. So being able to direct our force straight into the ground to propel ourselves upwards is a really good strategy. So our second movement I'm going to run you through today is a kettlebell deadlift. So this is a really important pattern for anyone who is picking things up off the ground, from our kind of mums picking up babies, anyone lifting any sort of weight, and to our athletes who are looking for their power development through their hip extension, particularly your runners, your football players, to your swimmers. So what we're looking for with our hinge pattern, we want to keep our nice neutral spine, so keeping our core engaged, nice deep breath into the bottom of our ribs. From there, we've got a slight bend in our knees, and we're breaking at the hips, pushing our hips back as far as we can, keep that neutral spine, and then we're pushing our hips forward and lifting our shoulders to extend. So one of the common movement faults we see with this is breaking at the hips but pushing our butt back. So one of the common cues that is commonly given with a deadlift is to push your butt back. Instead, I like to use a hips back cue, because taking our butt back, people tend to default into this state of an anteriorly tilted pelvis, and then they tend to lose a little bit of that core engagement and start to really load through their lower back. So one of the common faults we see with our deadlift pattern is what I like to call a duck bump. So the common cue that's given with a deadlift is butt back. Instead, I like to use the cue hips back. When we get the cue of butt back, people tend to default into an anteriorly tilted pelvic position. They tend to lose a little bit of that core engagement and really start to load through the back of their lumbar spine and their sacrum. So a lot of issues tend to come in. You lose a little bit of range of motion, and you lose a little bit of that force development and that stiffness that we really need to do an effective deadlift. One of the ways we can fix this is a roller assisted dowel RDL. You can also do this with a kettlebell as well. So the setup for this one, we stand with our feet hip width apart, toes pointing forward, chucking a small roller in between just above our knees. So this cues us to engage our core a little bit more and keep our squeeze. Stops us from getting that extra rotation through our pelvis. Then to supplement this, we can add a dowel. So one hand behind the back of your head, one hand in your lower back, and then we're keeping that nice stiffness through our core and pushing our hips back rather than our butt back to get this effective hinging pattern that we're looking for. The last movement we're going to run through is a bodyweight lunge. Now this is one that's really important for anyone who's walking upstairs, our athletes looking for power development, you runners. It's quite a relevant movement, especially getting up and down off the ground as well. So what we're looking for in a nice bodyweight lunge is a nice upright torso position, so keeping our core nice and engaged. We don't want any arching of our lower back or thoracic spine. We want to be stepping forward just far enough that we can keep our front knee over our front ankle and our back knee at a 90-degree angle. When we're pushing up out of the lunge, if we're doing a forward lunge, we're pushing up off the back foot without swinging ourselves forward. All of that force is coming from our glutes and our quads. If we're stepping back into the lunge, all of that drive is from our front heel, but the same thing, no swinging backwards or forwards. Some common faults that we see in our lunge are falling too far forward and caving over our knees. The first one, falling too far forward, can be caused by a couple of things. Can be limited range of motion, so trying to push past where your body is capable of getting to. So this is commonly seen with someone falling forward and collapsing into the bottom of the lunge and then having to push themselves up with their hands to get up out of the lunge. The second fault we commonly see with a lunge is the knees caving in and out. So this one can be caused by a lack of knee control, as well as some deficits at the glute and maybe the ankles. So what we ideally want to look for is our knees tracking over our toes. This is where our knees are caving in or out, depending on where different weaknesses are in the movement. This can also lead to the collapse in the bottom of the lunge as well, but again, caused by general instability around the body and the lack of that knee control. Some things we can do to fix this. So our first one is a pole assisted lunge. So you can do this with a dowel if you want to go more unsupported, or you can do it with a fixed pole. So having that support there and then guiding yourself down through your full range of motion. So ideally we want to control ourselves down till our back knee hits the ground. But if that's not where our range of motion is, then we support ourselves a little bit more. We can put a foam roller or a target underneath our knee and then guide ourselves down into that lunge.